Hi, Melina from Yogeek here today. So over the next couple weeks, we're going to be talking about hips and low back stuff and things. So I've had this requested a couple times from a few different people, so we'll talk about that. I actually just got done with a yoga class that addressed this as well. So we're going to kind of play with it from that side. So a really good stretch that I've talked about in another video, and I'll link that below, is how to release hip flexors using fascia release as well as some stretching. So a really common stretch is that low lunge. Now, what I see happen a lot is people either dumping into the low lunge so that they start feeling it in their low back, or they're kind of going through this like hyperextension through the thoracic, and then they're just kind of sitting in the joints, and it's not as effective. So we're going to break down a low lunge today, which seems super basic, but once you start thinking about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, I found it to be just more effective to kind of dial things back a little bit and make that mind-body connection to see what's going on. So low lunges, I would recommend having a blanket to help pad up your knees, just so it feels a little yummier. I'm all about things feeling yummy. So going to take 1 foot forward. My little stuff is coming off here. 1 foot forward. And we're looking at doing that 90-90. So what happens a lot of times when people move into a low lunge is they'll get here and then they'll just start to dump into it. And you're dumping into this low back. You're getting into this hip flexor, sure, but it's more, you're just hanging out there. And you put a lot of pressure on that lumbar spine. So for the purposes of this lesson, you can have toes tucked under or toenail side down, your preference. We're working on this 90-90, okay? With this front foot, I want you to think of gas pedal foot. So what I mean by that is that big toe mound, you're kind of pressing in, you feel the calf turn on a little bit. You still have weight in the heel, but that helps prevent you from having that knee rock out that happens a lot of the times. You want to activate that core. I have a video about that. I'll link that below. So you want to draw up and in. So engaging the pelvic floor muscles, lower transverse abs, all that yummy stuff. Take a peek at that back leg. Make sure you're not crossing the midline. And check in with the pelvis. So you might already kind of be dipping out to a side or just kind of leaning forward. And you want to think of bringing that pelvis under you. So for some of you where the hip flexors are tight already, and we talked about how that kind of pulls things forward, that can affect the lumbar spine as well, that pelvis being in a different position. This might be enough for you. Just kind of sussing this out, finding that engagement with the core, with the feet. And this might be enough to where you feel a stretch, but your back feels safe. Now to move deeper into it, I want you to think of your torso moving forward. So it's not a folding forward. All of this is going along for the ride. Whole pelvis is moving along. So it might not be as deep as what you would normally do probably on your regular stretching practice, whatever. So what I'm doing is kind of squinching my, that's an official term, toes forward, checking in the pelvis, making sure that they're tucking under, and already I'm feeling a little bit of a stretch in my hip flexor. Tummy is in, shoulder blades are down, and I'm just squinching it a little bit forward. The glutes activated to help stabilize, and I do have a little pressure on this toenail side down to help kind of draw this femur under still. Now, obviously, I'm moving forward a little bit, but not as much as I did in that first example I showed you. So you're just going to hang out here. Have your hands on your hip points and make sure you're not accidentally opening up. So this hip is coming forward. This one is coming back, active in the front foot. And as you move deeper, the glute here is activating to help control the movement forward, so you're not just dumping in. If you want, you can stay with this, or you can start to lift the arms. Now what happens here is we start to get this arch. which for the purposes of this lesson, I want you to think of keeping those rib cages down, working on keeping that neutral spine. And then the beauty of this is I want you to take your time as you're like, oh, I can move a little deeper, like things kind of relaxed. I can move a little deeper. But I want you to keep it out of your back, okay? And a nice counter for this, so you do this on both sides. A nice counter for this is moving from a hip glide to kind of an up dog. So what you're going to do here is come into your tabletop position. So wrists are under shoulders. Take a little time here, soften through the elbows, press through so the neck is relaxed, nice and long, and you're keeping those shoulders from scrunching up to the ears. So you're in your tabletop position, keeping the toes tucked under. You're going to glide back, and you're not changing the shape of your spine. So you're not tucking the pelvis and moving into a child's pose. Gliding back. Now, as you come forward, I want you to take a moment, stop through tabletop, re-engage, walk the hands a little bit forward. You're going to come onto almost like this top part of your knee. I don't want you to be right on top of that patella. Untuck the toes, loop the shoulders back, and I am not dumping in. I'm engaging that core to keep me up. And then you're going to come through tabletop, walk the hands back, nice and methodically. Hip glide back. Come forward. Loop the shoulders. And I have a little engagement with my legs, so I'm pressing down with my legs to help lift the knees a little bit. But because I'm engaging that low ab and I'm moving through this really slowly, I'm getting a stretch in that up dog through the quads and the hip flexors, but I'm not dumping into that low back. So those are a couple ideas just to work on the hip flexor, things to be mindful of. I would encourage you to just practice it on each side. One side might feel tighter, but to take the time and kind of suss it out and just notice like where you're feeling the stretch, if it's going into the low back, and then doing that release afterwards. So I'm going to spend a few lessons on this because hips and low back, I mean, I could spend hours talking about it, but we'll keep these short. I'm not going to do a sting 'em in this week because I want you to focus more on the technique and sussing stuff out for this. Go back and review some of the other videos I've posted. And then when you're doing a workout, you know, just be mindful of where you're going with that stretch. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about strengthening in the lunges and whatnot. But yeah, so I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to playing with you. And yeah, okay, much love.